This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former Senator Howard Lee, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, syndicated columnist John Hood, and Becki Gray from the John Locke Foundation. Welcome to this week's edition of our show. We've got some interesting topics to consider, including a discussion about lawmakers getting a pleasant April surprise from tax revenues, Duke Energy's plan for coal ash storage, and whether lawmakers should be in charge of setting the start and stop dates for the school year. Let's get started. The crossover deadline is passed, and now the legislature faces the serious business of passing a two-year budget to begin July 1. They got good news this week when leaders were informed the state would end the year with a $400 million surplus over projected revenues. Becki Gray, this was quite an April surprise, since as late as last month there were projections this would end with a slight deficit. The question is how the legislature is going to deal with this surplus. Are they going to spend it on next year's budget or save it? What's the consensus? Well,
the initial consensus as this news came out is that the reforms that the General Assembly and this governor have put into place are working. North Carolina's economy is recovering, and all these gloom and doom predictions earlier that there was going to be a big shortfall and other things has not come to pass. And rightfully so, Republicans are basking in this, if you will. But as you mentioned, the next order of business is very serious to get down to the budget. I think what you're going to see, what this has done is it has really reinforced the principles and the confidence that the leaders have in the direction that they're taking the state and making good on promises that they've made to taxpayers across North Carolina. So what I think you're going to see are, first of all, making good on the promises to increase the beginning pay for beginning teachers up to $35,000. Also going ahead and putting in place those six-step pay increases for all teachers. I think we'll see that. I wouldn't be surprised if finally they stop the diversion of the highway tax fund from the general fund and leave all of that money in the highway fund and fill that hole with this surplus. I think we also may see a focus on some saving money. The governor initially said that's where he wanted to see it. I'm hearing other legislators say we need to build up the reserves and the savings accounts.
Chris, okay. Was it the surge in the tax revenues? I mean, when they passed the tax revenues, we were told that most people were going to be saving, the tax reforms, we were told most people were going to be saving money on their income taxes. Is it looking like what happened was they ended up paying more?
Well, it looks like that the big surge was in business, personal income taxes, which are reflected in a lot of them were business taxes, corporate taxes, capital gains taxes, stock sales, all sorts of those things. It's interesting to me that I think this is good news. People are, Becki says, are crowing about it. They have the right to. I think it is good news. They have to decide what to do with the money. It's also worth noting Barry Boardman, the chief economist of the General Assembly, in his memo explaining this, pointed out that many states had a huge positive April surprise, that the economy, at least in this year, this last calendar year, is a lot better. So a lot of this, some of this, and Speaker Moore even referred to it, is the economy everywhere is getting a lot better. So I think that's also good news.
Howard, the House Speaker Tim Moore now says that he wants to get a budget out of the House by May 20th. Now, you've been involved in a lot of these discussions for many, many years. We haven't had any Appropriations Committee meetings. We haven't had any open discussions whatsoever about how the spending's going to take place. And in fact, they said they wanted to wait until they found out about the tax rate. How's he going to put a budget together between now and May 20th?
Well, when I heard the speaker say that, I thought it was comical because he had an easy job making the budget when they had a deficit. But now that they have a surplus, everybody's going to come to the table and want to have something to say. So he's going to have a tough job trying to make that deadline.
Well, that raises a great question, John, because after we take care of the factor of enrollment increases in universities and public schools, putting aside money for rainy day and building maintenance, which the legislature says they want to do, Medicaid increases, how much is actually going to be left?
Well, it's not clear yet. We don't actually know what the surplus is going to be because remember, this is just the revenue side. Yeah. We've also got the spending side. We have money that is authorized but not spent that reverts back to the general fund. That's part of the surplus dollars as well. So we don't know what the total surplus will be. Much of it will be consumed the way you described by Medicaid. But I think it is high priority. You can see it not just in the governor's statements, but also in Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger. He also noted that our savings accounts are too low. He said we need about twice as much in savings as we currently have. I think he's absolutely right. The statute requires a certain percentage of the surplus to go into the rainy day fund and into repair and renovations, as you said, but they ought to go above and beyond that. That and teacher pay and public employee raises really ought to be their main priority.
But final question to build on Howard Lee's point a few moments ago. Everybody's now your friend that you've got money. So how difficult is it going to be for this legislature to get a budget put together? For the House presents theirs first, then the Senate's going to present their version, and then we've got a conference together and get it resolved. How difficult is it going to be to get this done before July 1st?
I think it's going to be a tough task, but I sure wish them well and hope they can get it done, because the governor has come out and has his priorities of what he'd like to see done. And of course, the legislature will impose its will. So I think it'll be a tough task to do it, but I sure hope they can make it.
We'll all be pulling for them, huh?
Absolutely.
Well, if you like NC Spin and you want more, be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or NC Spin on Facebook. We've got exclusive video footage you can't get anywhere else. Plus, you can read perspectives from opinion leaders across our state. So get more balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com, or NC Spin on Facebook, or at NC Spin Tweets. When we come back after these messages, we'll talk about coal ash storage.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
98% of farms are family farms. Families that believe in values like hard work, faith, and integrity. Farmers care for their crops, land, and animals because it's their passion and it's the right thing to do. They take pride in raising healthy, affordable food for your family and their own. Their livelihood depends on it. At Farm Bureau, we believe in farmers, their values, and their way of life.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception. Keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
The North Carolina Homeowners Alliance strongly supports the Property Insurance Fairness Act in the North Carolina General Assembly by strengthening consumer protection, increasing transparency in insurance rates, and expanding North Carolina's ability to respond to catastrophes. The Property Insurance Fairness Act helps safeguard North Carolina's homeowners, communities, and the economy. Please thank your legislators for standing up for what's right.
We now return to NC Spin.
It was February 2014 that our state learned of a massive coal ash spill in the Dan River. Duke Energy has come forward now with a plan for storage of that coal ash that has many applauding, since something is finally happening. But it's also troubling to others, especially those in the counties where the ash will be stored. The plan is to build landfills lined with plastic no thicker than 2 credit cards stuck together to store the ash. The construction firm responsible says the liners are virtually indestructible and will last more than 500 years. John Hood, we know something's got to be done with all this coal ash our power plants have generated. Is this the best solution? What do you think of this plan?
Well, it's better than putting it in unlined landfills. I don't really think there's an alternative. I mean, we're not going to make a pile of it and jump in it. We're not going to throw it in the river. It's ash. I assume you can't burn this ash down much further than it already is. So we're going to end up putting it in lined landfills, as far as I know. Maybe some of it can go into construction materials and things as we've been talking about on the program before, but the real question is simply how long-lived are these liners? Are there alternative products? But lined landfills appear to be the obvious choice.
Chris, a lot of people say Duke is just overselling this whole proposition, telling us that these things are virtually indestructible and can last 500 years. didn't this destroy some of their credibility? Making claims like
well, they
this?
don't, you know, I think part of the problem here is the technology. Part of the problem is Duke's credibility in the first place. I mean, we still have, you know, the CEO recently gave a talk and said coal ash really isn't that bad for you. There's really nothing in it that's bad. And then a week later, the state issues a warning for people who are living near coal ash ponds not to drink the water where they live. There are some contaminants and carcinogens in coal ash, and we need to figure out how to deal. But John is right. The best solution currently available is lined landfills, and I think the decision is not just putting coal ash in lined landfills, it's how many of the current landfills need to be closed and moved to lined landfills. That's still, I think, an open question. The General Assembly and the Coal Ash Commission are going to have to decide when to move them all. You know, South Carolina is in the process of transferring all the coal ash from ponds to lined landfills. We're not doing that here. That's not in the legislation. The Coal Ash Commission is going to have to make them do that.
Becki, one of the, you've got a point to make, but one of the scientists commenting on this said, you ought to design all of these things with the understanding that there's going to be leakage.
Well, and I guess there certainly could be, but one of the other things too, it's not only that they're moving them to lined landfills, but they're moving them away from the public water sources, and I think that's significant too. So they're lining them and they're getting them further away from the public water sources where the leakage obviously would be a problem. You know, it's certainly something that needs to be considered. One of the things that, you know, as John mentioned, some of the material, some of the innovation that we've had, I just have tremendous confidence in our engineers in North Carolina. My daughter is an engineer, educated at NC State, and I know how smart those people are. And, you know, to continue to look for additional uses, alternative uses, if these landfills last 500 years, that's assuming that nobody's going to be able to figure out some other way to use this stuff.
Well, and they're saying, Howard, that after they fill these landfills up, that they could actually reclaim some of this land and use it for agricultural purposes and development purposes. How do you feel about that?
I certainly think that the coal ash problem can become an asset if we put our minds to it and make it work, but I'm still concerned. Some of you will remember that I lived through a PCB problem.
Yes, you did.
And had to find a way to handle that. And we're still not sure what PCB is going to be. As a matter of fact, I talked with one of the people who were involved earlier today to say, what do you think is happening to PCB? I have been and I'm more concerned about groundwater than I am about contaminating wells and that sort of thing, because we've always had concerns about contamination of our groundwater and the groundwater tables. I would like personally to have seen some kind of container built above ground and put the coal ash there, and then see if we can figure out a way to use it in a constructive fashion, either as a part of construction or in some agricultural forms. But
and John, I mean, again, we're talking about credibility here, but the same week almost that they've announced this plan for storing coal ash, Duke comes out now with wells that are near other coal ash sites, telling the residents in those localities not to drink the water. The water's contaminated. Shouldn't that be scaring all of us a lot?
Well, I don't think we should get overly terrified, but I think we should be prudently concerned. And I think, as Chris was saying, the problem here is Duke has credibility problems. They stem not just from the coal ash and environmental matters, but as we all know, from the original problem with the merger with Progress Energy.
Boy, it does.
And this is the danger that everyone, regardless of whether they're in public office or in private business or nonprofits, once you lose your credibility, it is very difficult to recover it.
Yeah. All right, after these messages, we're going to come back and ask the question, who should decide the start and end of the school year?
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Where do you go when you need to know? ANC makes it easy for you to get the information you need to make well-informed public policy decisions. Our members are industry leaders who are ready to share their industry-specific insights with you. Want to hear both sides of the story? ANC members can tell you. Just use the ANC member directory as your guide or call us directly. ANC members have the knowledge, expertise, and perspective you need to create public policies that are good for North Carolina. We are ready for your call.
The Medicaid system is not a perfect system, There are things that could be changed, but there's a lot that's going well with the system. Community Care of North Carolina is in place. It's a team of nurses, advisors, caregivers who help us out. We want to call and say, look, I've got Miss So-and-so here. She needs to have her weight checked each day because she's got congestive heart failure. Can you send one of those monitors out to the house and keep an eye on this and let me know if her weight goes up too much, because if it does, she's retaining fluid and she's going to be back in the hospital. We work together with them. That's a great system. It saves a lot of money. It's proven to work. We're not opposed to changing the things that need to be changed, but let's not throw out everything that we worked for the past 15 to 20 years.
North Carolina's Family Physicians supports Medicaid reform that builds on our state's foundation of medical homes. OurNCHealthcare.com.
Does your North Carolina business or organization have a story to tell? I'm Richard Campbell, and at Carolina Broadcasting and Publishing, we help tell stories that connect you to the people who will respond. We take the time to understand our clients' needs and what makes them unique. We craft their stories through the efficient use of words, images, and videos that resonate with their desired audience. We also know that a good story is incomplete without a call to action. On video, on air, online, and in print, from concept to final production, no one can help tell your story more effectively or affordably than we can. For special introductory offers, visit carolinabroadcasting.com or call 919-832-1416. Again, that's carolinabroadcasting.com. Let us help tell your story today.
We now return to NC Spin.
As the school year winds down and students and teachers are getting ready for summer vacation, there are many raising the question whether the legislature should tell public schools when to open and close. Because of calendar creep starting earlier and earlier in August and letting out later and later in June, the legislature passed a law 11 years ago mandating starting and ending parameters for the school calendar. Now the schools are insisting that they, not the legislature, should make those decisions. Howard Lee, you were in the Senate when this law was passed. We tell the schools they can't start earlier than the Monday closest to August 26th and end no later than the Friday closest to June 11th. But is it time to review and revise the way we establish these dates?
I think it's past time, Tom. I never liked this legislation, even when I was participating in trying to get it through the legislature. First of all, it creates a real challenge in trying to align how students can graduate from school and still be able to get into a college or university, because those calendars are out of sync. Second, the chickens are coming home to roost right now, because with all the bad weather we've had, school boards are struggling trying to decide how they're going to make up the days that they're required to put in each year. And now families are upset because they can't get their weekends, long weekends away. And so it is a challenge that I think we need to leave in the hands of the local boards of education, and the legislature needs to get out of it altogether.
But Becki, how do you deal with this? I mean, if school boards and school systems are not going to be responsible about containing these school calendars, I mean, at one point, we were starting school the first week in August and not getting out until the third week in June. So that's when the legislature stepped in.
Well, there's still a requirement that students have to attend school for 180 days or whatever that equivalent number of hours is. So there is some discipline instilled in this that they have to go for a certain amount of time. One of the things, at the same time that we're having this discussion about the school calendar flexibility, there's also a lot of movements going through the General Assembly that have to do with digital learning and putting more things available online. And this whole discussion may at some point become moot when students can access their classes, when teachers can conduct classes by internet, so you can sit at home on a snowy day drinking your hot chocolate and take your calculus class.
I'm sure kids will be delighted to hear that.
Yeah, that's good news for all of them.
Let's do calculus.
There was a collective sigh of relief there.
It solves the problem, and then you don't have the makeup days and those other things, and that may be the direction we're going in.
John, this whole concept of school calendars was basically started back when we were largely an agrarian society, and kids were needed to come back and work on the farms during the summer to help harvest crops. We don't have that anymore. Why do we have this archaic notion of having to have 6 weeks, 9 weeks, 12 weeks off during the summer.
Well, you know, even what you just said is an archaic notion. That's not really how we ended up with summer vacations. If you really wanted your kids off to help harvest the crops, then you would have been taking vacations in the autumn, not in the middle of the summer. It was really about weather and other factors. It was not so much about the agrarian calendar. But look, at this point, the state shouldn't be mandating any of this. Think about the broader significance of this issue. What the state should be requiring of local school districts is you have to teach certain courses. You have to teach a certain number of hours a year. Your students have to take some standardized measurements so we have some sense of evaluating across districts, across schools, because you can't have everyone give a different test, so you have no way to compare anything. But other than that, you can decide what you're going to pay your employees. You can decide how you're going to deploy them in your classroom. You can decide how many days in a particular week or when you start and when you stop your school year. We should be making as many of those decisions as possible at the local level, having the state ensure accountability. Instead, we're still dictating from Raleigh items that are unnecessary to be standardized.
But our laws, Chris, say that teachers have to have a certain number of work days, and students have to go a certain number of days per year, get a certain number of hours of instruction time per year. We've got a certain number of mandated state holidays. I mean, it is a difficult task trying to work these things out.
Well, it's a difficult task if you have those arbitrary beginning and end lines. And we haven't talked about one of the larger lobbying forces for this original bill, which is the tourism industry that wants to make sure every family has a summer vacation and they can go to the coast or go to the mountains or do whatever they do and spend money in the economy. But, you know, we already have school systems that have year-round schools now that take breaks, that go to class for several weeks, take a week off. I agree with John about this one. I don't understand why we would claim we're all for local control of schools and then tell them when kids have to go to school, when they can't go to school. And if people are really upset about it, we elect boards of education. If this becomes a huge problem in the community, it could be a campaign issue and parents could change it. I think the legislature should listen to the educators, let educators make the decision, not the tourism industry.
I think schools would be better served making sure that children are educated and not worrying so much about this other stuff.
All right. After these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Hi, I'm Linda Loveland. I want the best for my kids. Feeding them foods they like within my budget is a priority. But what do we really know about these foods? North Carolina farmers and food experts give you a website to find it all. FeedTheDialogueNC.com, a place where moms like you and me can learn more about the foods we eat and the farmers that feed us. Check it out. Add your input and help feed the dialogue. Let's talk food at FeedTheDialogueNC.com.
I was asked by someone months ago, isn't Medicaid in North Carolina broken? And my answer was no. There are parts of it that need to be improved. There are parts that need to be changed. But the whole system's not broken. There are a lot of things that are working very well. What is working well is that we have a physician-led, physician-guided team effort. It's built on the concept of physicians having medical homes, patients having medical homes. And that system that we've created in North Carolina has done wonderful work. It has saved money, it's improved quality, and we have data that demonstrates that. That's what we need to retain. That's what we need to build upon. We don't need to replace that.
North Carolina's Family Physicians supports Medicaid reform that builds on our state's foundation of medical homes. OurNCHealthcare.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
Well, I'll have to tell you, I know a little something about what's going to happen in the rest of the show, but I don't know what's going to happen in this segment every week, which makes it fun. We asked the panel to tell us something we don't know. Chris Fitzsimon, we'll start with you.
One of the most intriguing debates of this session, interestingly, is over a bill that would expand where you could take a gun, how you would get a permit. It's a gun bill introduced by Representative Jacqueline Schaefer, which passed a House committee. She had watered it down some, but then interestingly, it didn't pass the House. They had to put an appropriation on it. It was supposed to come up this past week, and an unusual coalition of doctors are upset about it, and medical professionals, because the bill restricts what a doctor can or a medical provider can ask a patient about firearms. So the doctors are upset on one hand. It also eliminates handgun permits, which means that about 40% of the handguns sold in North Carolina would then be, who are sold from private dealers, there'd be no background check done. So the sheriffs who issue the handgun permits, they're opposed to it. So you have the sheriffs and the doctors opposing a gun bill, which normally sails through this conservative General Assembly. It was delayed again. It's been delayed a couple of times. I think this is one of the more intriguing debates of this session.
So what's going to happen?
I think that Representative Schaefer is still trying to work with these groups. Some version of it will pass.
She doesn't know either.
Well, there's a lot of provisions in it. I think some of them will pass, but I hope that the sheriffs and the doctors prevail.
Interesting. Howard Lee, tell us something we don't know.
A couple of incidences have occurred during the last months or so. One at Duke, when the young man hung the noose in the tree. And then this week, a couple of young ladies at East Chapel Hill High School talked about the South rising again, and they were ready to buy their slaves. Now, I'm all for the South rising again, but certainly not for the buying and selling of slaves. Yes. But I was amazed that the school system chalked this up as a teenage prank, and I think that's true, except teenagers pulled a prank on me about 39 years ago when I bought a house, and then they came and burned a cross in my yard. Really? It didn't feel like a prank to me. So I'm hoping that the school system, at least in Chapel Hill, will ask these young ladies to go write a paper on the history of slavery so they can understand the implications of what their words do to other people. But finally, I think it's probably a case we need to reintroduce U.S. history, because some of our kids, I think, don't know.
Becki, tell us something we don't know.
Talking about the budget and General Assembly getting started with the budget. Now, something we're probably not going to hear about this budget cycle, but we need to start thinking about it, is the state health plan. Years moving forward, we have 700,000 state employees and retirees on the state health plan, and when the cost of health care go up, it affects that state health plan, and we pay for that as taxpayers. So moving forward, that's something that we really need to start looking at. It is going to become a problem later. And this session,
we already have like a $40 billion unfunded mandate.
And we need to look at things during this session of things that will begin to reduce the cost of health care, like repealing certificate of need and individual insurance plans and some things like that.
John, tell us something we don't know.
Well, everybody knows that North Carolina Democrats have been nervously waiting for someone to step forward and say, I'm going to run against Richard Burr in the U.S. Senate race in 2016. They thought Kay Hagan would be an option. She doesn't appear to be interested. So the talk now is about Mike McIntyre, former congressman from southeastern North Carolina. I'm made to understand that is an unlikely event for him. He's watching to see if there's any possibility that Burr will become more vulnerable than he currently seems. Right now, Democrats simply do not have a strong candidate to run against Burr.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback and read our weekly columns. Visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And we hope you'll join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.